It is obvious that the current Sino-US game has officially entered a new phase, shifting from defense to a counter-hunting moment. However, this time, the hunter is us. In the past 30 years, the powerful US and its allies have never suffered such grievances as they do today. Just a short time ago, China and the US clashed a few more times, but the result left the United States in a mess. The first event was the United States' decision to increase the port service fee for our shipments starting October 14th. We immediately provided appropriate countermeasures, and specific U.S. shipments also received special port fees. At the same time, we implemented export controls on rare earths, a critical ACE card. This move hit the United States hard. The former president couldn't sit still for a moment, posting thousands of long articles on social media overnight to announce an increase in tariffs on us. He attempted to use the threat of a 100% tariff increase to force us to concede. Smart people can tell at a glance that this is very unusual. You know, in the last round of the tariff war, the United States not only failed to get any benefits, but was also left with egg on its face. This time, knowing our firm attitude, they still decided to take the lead. This can only mean that the real purpose is not in the trade itself. So what is it? The answer is simple, because they suddenly realized that the United States is spiraling out of control. Let me ask you a question. What is the biggest difference between China and the United States, or what is our biggest advantage? It's that our margin of error is different. In the simplest terms, we can afford to lose, but the United States can only win. Everything in the United States is built on the foundation of winning. Especially after the fall of the Soviet Union in the 90s, the United States officially established its unique international status. This has made it completely lose the capacity for losing. If one day the United States can't win, then its entire system is at risk. Unfortunately for them, today, the United States has met an opponent that it can't win against. This is forcing it to face the collapse of its three core systems. 1. The crumbling alliance system. The first system is the network of allies that helps the U.S. maintain its global hegemony. I don't know if you remember the 2018 trade war, but think about how many little brothers followed the United States to encircle us at that time. Japan followed the U.S. and imposed tariffs on our steel. Australia jumped out to restrict our agricultural product imports. Even the EU followed the U.S. in the field of science and technology. At that time, the United States was a rallying force. But now, Japan and South Korea are feigning compliance, saying one thing while doing another. European countries are quietly dismantling things from behind. Only India and the Philippines are somewhat obedient, and as a result, they've been beaten into honesty. The once mighty United States is now seeing its allies go their own ways. When you can't keep winning, your alliance system is bound to fall apart. 2. The internal split between states. The second conflict is between the federal government and local state governments. You know, today, the United States is actually on the brink of civil strife. Do you remember the fights in Los Angeles this year? Street fires and conflicts continued to escalate overnight, leaving the whole city in a state of chaos. And this is just one of the internal contradictions. On October 1st, just a few days ago, Donald Trump put the problem directly on the table, claiming that the United States is facing an internal war and vowing to mobilize military forces in major cities like San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. To put it bluntly, it's all about interests. The United States is like a large business. The federal government sets the rules, and each state works together to make money. This worked when they were always winning. The only argument was about who got a bigger slice of the cake. But now it's different. The United States can't win, and the cake isn't growing. For example, some agriculture and trade states used to have a good life doing business with us, but round after round of trade wars directly smashed their rice bowls. Meanwhile, states that rely on traditional industry, like Michigan, are firm supporters of the trade war. This has caused a serious internal split of interests in the United States, pitting state against state and states against the federal government. The third, the failing two-party system. The first two are actually just small problems. Not being the world's boss or having some internal chaos can be managed over time. But this third contradiction is the biggest trouble for the United States today because it threatens the very foundation of the American system. The American people are helpless now because they've found that the Democratic Party can't win and the Republican Party can't win. Maybe you still remember how crazy the former president was when he first came on stage, but it turned out to be a mess. None of the promises made at the beginning were fulfilled. Instead, the United States fell into an even more complicated situation. This made Americans suddenly discover that neither party is reliable. It even forced figures like Elon Musk to consider starting a third party. This is the first time in decades that the U.S. has questioned its own system. Take the solution to inflation. When the Democratic Party came to power, they shouted about relying on printing money to solve the problem. As a result, they printed too much money and inflation went through the roof. Then the Republican Party came on and said they would rely on tax cuts to stimulate the economy. But with the government's income lowered, they could only rely on borrowing to live. The two sides quarreled, inflation wasn't contained, and the national debt got bigger and bigger. This model, where one party digs a hole and the next one falls into it, only worked because it was supported by external gains. In the past few decades, the United States, with its dominant advantage, was unbeatable. Even if it dug a hole internally, it could be quickly filled with profits from abroad. But today's America has been tormented to its limit. What follows will be more and more failures. The final standoff, China's counterhunting. From the dissolution of foreign alliances to the turbulence of domestic politics, and now to questioning the system itself, the U.S. has reached its most critical moment. One step forward, and it will immediately face our countermeasures. One step back, and the American hegemony built on win-win will collapse in an instant. To be precise, today's America has been encircled by us. So we've found that the current president is in a hurry because he needs a victory to stabilize the situation. But it's obvious that today we don't plan to give him any chance. If you dare to collect a port fee, I'll counterattack right away. If you dare to continue to make trouble, I will immediately restrict rare earths. It's just that simple. Some people may say, aren't you afraid that the American dog will jump over the wall? To be honest, we're really not afraid. What we want is for the dog to try and jump the wall, because today we have full confidence in putting all threats 1,000 miles away. This is our bottom line.